Now that Councilor Smallwood is here, I'll start the work session. Tyler, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilor Pietzel.
Here.
Councilor Smallwood.
Here.
Councilor Hamlin.
Here.
Councilor Lee.
Here.
Councilor Exner.
Here.
Councilor Schultz. Mayor Pulliam.
Here. All right, welcome. Our work session tonight's going to be kind of a history review of the Sandy style design standards. But before we go into that, let's just do our quick review of the agenda tonight. We have our consent agenda, which has the minutes and the Parks and Trails Advisory board member appointment. So obviously, kind of the change on this is we're doing the board member appointment in a quicker consent agenda. I feel pretty good about this, considering we had our council liaison as part of the interview process. Everybody comfortable with having that in the consent?
Looking forward to the surf park.
Into the what?
The surf park.
Why not? The only thing I would say is, the real comfort level for me is that we had a council liaison as part of that, so if we don't, I'd like to see it not be part of the consent agenda, but as long as we have a counselor.
He's more than qualified.
Yeah.
He's done tons of.
Cool. So with that, we have a couple ordinances. We have the FSH Overlay map update. We have a development code modification. Any questions on those?
I did have well, I can bring it up there, on the fish overlay,
Yeah.
the two pieces of property, there's a property in the middle that didn't work with those, and maybe you'll bring that up.
It's outside of city limits.
It is, so you aren't doing the fish overlay over just the urban, reserves, so when it comes back in, we don't have to do that again?
It would be awesome if we had money to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd have to pay a consultant to go and survey each individual property.
Oh.
The other real hurdle is we would have to get permission from all this property owners to own that property to do that.
I thought we had done that in the years past, and I may have not just known because it was already there, that there's a fish overlay already, and then overlay to the urban growth, but, so thanks for explaining that.
I will let you know that in the future, what we're gonna recommend is that when they come in through the annexation procedure and change the zoning map, at that same time, the FSH map would be updated. So we wouldn't have to then bring it back through later on.
And who pays for it at that point?
The applicant. That's what our attorney has recommended as well.
And who pays for it now?
The applicant.
We can get into it one.
Yeah, that's fine, I just was.
And then we'll get into our reports, and then did everybody figure out that we had the executive session tonight? We'll got the heads up on that. Great. With that, Mr.
Take it
Kelly,
away.
You're up, yes.
So I'm just gonna kind of walk through these slides. I gave a printout of the slides to everybody so you can just look at that, or we can also pull it up on the screens. In saying that, I'm just gonna kind of go through these slides and just kind of not really read off of them, so the things off of them you can kind of just read through. I will point to certain things on different slides, especially when there's pictures or dates associated. And then please feel free to just ask questions as we go along. Much rather do that than wait to the end. So the first thing we kind of want to talk about, and I want this to be more of a discussion, I guess, and I think Jeremy and Carl would be very instrumental in this because they both, I believe, were on council when the Sandy style was adopted.
Planning.
Oh, both on planning commission at the time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So one of the questions that kind of comes up a lot with design standards is why do you have them? I think there's a lot of different reasons. The reasons that we put on this slide are just some of them. What I can tell you is I've worked in 2 other jurisdictions that didn't have them, and you get a much bigger mix of what the buildings look like and what the outcomes with the design of the site and also the building. So I think it gives you a lot of cohesion. It also gives you kind of more, or the attempt to give you more of a sense of place when you drive through a different community, that when they have design standards, even like the McDonald's or the different buildings that are fast food chains won't look like the same McDonald's in the town next door. So, you know, one of the negative things about them is it costs more money to construct Sandy style. I think one of the positive outcomes of that is that you do incur more taxes from them. Now, what those numbers are, I have no idea. We'd have to ask a construction expert for that.
Can I apologize? And you may get to this. You mentioned McDonald's. So we just saw McDonald's going through a deal, and Taco Bell just went through it, and KFC. So So when they go through that, I mean, obviously we have our facade improvement deal that they try to participate or not. But, so what standards are now in place now that you're doing a renovation of any kind? Do you now have to pick off of the color palette of the sandy style? I mean,
That's a
what are
great
the
question,
considerations?
yeah. And I think it really does depend on what level of changes you're making. So McDonald's, for instance, that's a great one to talk about. They're making a $350,000 renovation, and we're basically making them come into compliance as much, basically almost full compliance.
That's exciting.
Now, there's a few things that are very hard once the building already exists, and that's like articulation or building placement on the site. Those things are kind of set. So the sandy style would prefer the McDonald's to probably be located slightly different, have a little more articulation, but we understand there's some limitations there. But you know, they will be implementing new colors, like you said. They're going to be putting in wood frame features on it with rock base, and they're going to be doing a lot more different sandy style elements. Getting rid of those mansard roofs,
Yeah.
those ugly old
Now,
roofs.
you used an interesting word that I might have been wrong, but you said made. Maybe you didn't say it, but it sounded like they had to do some of these changes when KFC and Taco Bell and some of these aren't. So what kind of constitutes them having to do it versus not?
I don't think the code's 100% clear on that.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's something, if we look at doing some modifications to the chapter, we would want to button up. So KFC is another good example. That whole renovation is only $50,000, and the outside portions that you see was only about a third of that. Most of it was the kitchen and the dining area. So that's kind of the question that we ask ourselves: is if they're only making $15,000 worth of outside changes, you're not going to really be able to. I don't think the code would support you saying, you know, you're going to have to put a ton of wood on there, a ton of rock work everywhere. I think what we tried to do in that case was get them to come into compliance with the color, get rid of the thematic idea. If you look at a lot of KFCs around the area, they're putting like a circus look on them with kind of like white, red really quickly. So we talked them out of that. We got rid of like that pyramid that was on top of it. And so we try to get it going towards the sandy style look. And then we also made them put an awning or an entry over the main entry for the customers. Although it's not on there yet, but they're gonna have to do that. So there were some things that they weren't going to do, but because of sandy style, it forced them to do it. But that is a great question, like where, and I'll get into that, but if you're basically changing the color, then you have to bring it into compliance with our color palette. If you're going like for like on the color, you don't have to follow the color palette, that's what the code says. And then if you're doing general maintenance, which is kind of hard to define sometimes too, then you don't have to do sandy style. So KFC, we believed they were doing above and beyond general maintenance. They agreed. And so we said, well, you're gonna have to do some new sandy style elements. McDonald's obviously is not maintenance. Taco Bell was probably the closest to maintenance, and that's why they probably had the least change kind of to what they're doing.
Now, when
Really
a
a
company
maintenance.
has a copyrighted emblem, color, style, whatever that is, how do we push them around? And in my mind, I was very watchful of, it was the farmer's insurance that was inside our building there at Windermere. They had only put a sign on it. They had the emblem that was, and the colors were a bit off from sandy style color, but there was a big fight for quite a few days, I understand, of how to move the farmer's insurance company to allow that to happen, since they had a standardized color, which wasn't quite our color. How do we push those aside?
I mean, our code's very prescriptive in that method, in that it says thematic architecture that's in line with a national brand. If it's not cohesive with, like Cabela's would probably be cohesive with sandy style, so it'd probably be fine.
Sure, right.
But something like a KFC where they're trying to go for kind of a circus look is not cohesive with sandy style. So we've used that on, I'll just give you an example of where we've used it. We've used it on KFC, we used it slightly on Taco Bell. They wanted kind of crazier colors on there. We used it with the Best Western, with the Ford, with the Chevy. And most of the time the property owner or the franchisee is actually not that resistant. It's just that they then had to run it up the line to the corporate, yeah. So it definitely puts delays in the process, but so far we haven't run into a single organization that hasn't complied with it. And McDonald's, actually of all people, they were like, yeah, whatever your code says.
Yeah, they're in so many neighborhoods.
I know, yeah, exactly.
Jeremy?
Yeah, the Schwabs, yeah.
So I was looking at the timeline, I was on council, or planning when we started talking about it, and then, was on council when we adopted it. And when I say that, cause I remember something to the effect of some, and you can correct me if I'm misremembering something, it's been so long. But, if there was a certain percentage of the building or a certain dollar amount of the upgrade of the building, it triggered doing the Sandy style, as that we talked about at the very beginning of it, and I can't remember, and one of them was, and I could be maybe mixing that up with a different upgrade of a building or something triggering that they can put in, but I wanna say it was like 15%, or there was some mechanism, we talked about it.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
There is, you might be thinking of the sidewalk and undergrounding utilities.
Mm.
So if a building is upgraded beyond a certain percent value-wise,
Mhm.
then you do have to put in sidewalks, curb, everything like that, and then also underground the electrical.
Okay,
So there is requirements tied to percent of cost for that.
okay, I might be mixing it.
Emily, do you recall anything in the design standards? Yeah,
Okay.
I don't recall anything.
We went, last time I remember we went through that with Billy was up on the Lutheran church. Because they came in with their number and the number was like 14.89% and 15 was the.
Right, yeah.
So then you started going, what is that use anyway? You know, so, but, there was a point at which it won't be on Sandy style, it's bringing stuff up to code when you do a certain percent of changes.
Anyways, sorry.
Jan?
Yeah, this is an easy question. If people
Thank you.
are not required to do it, are they allowed to be in the program if they just want to choose to do it?
Oh, you're talking about for facade?
Yeah, the Sandy program.
Yeah, so, that would be very clear that if they were going for a facade grant, they would have to, we try to work with them to kind of get what they want out of the project, but they do have to implement some Sandy style changes. If they're not going for a facade grant, then they just have to follow code. Is that what you're kind of asking?
But what I really meant was, can just anyone be in the program even if they're not doing the upgrade? If they
Oh,
just
certainly,
choose
yeah,
to? Okay.
definitely, yeah.
I think one of the biggest successes was Ace Hardware.
Yeah.
It was one of the first ones, and they came in, cause I think they wanted a new roof because it was leaking or whatever, and then the city came over to them and said, hey, that's awesome. You wanna do all these other changes and we'll help pay for that, and anyway, it was a good early win.
So can you back it up just one or two if you don't mind?
We
Oh.
exhausted them.
It's fine.
Keep going, Kelly.
It's fine, no, I like, I prefer this to I hate structured PowerPoints, to be honest, so this is perfect for me. So what is Sandy style? As you all know, it's kind of like a cascading and architectural, English arts, crafts, and Oregon rustic styles. I kind of relate it to like 1930s, workers' buildings like in national parks that you see. I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to look like. If you go to the next slide. So Jeremy kind of already hinted at this. This is kind of the Sandy style evolution. I started working here in 2011, so this was all done before my time here. But it looks like it went from about 2006 to 2008. Obviously with these sorts of things, there's probably things even before 2006, I'm guessing.
Yeah, cause when I came on planning in 2004 or 5, they were already we were talking about it and doing the stuff.
So that's kind of the timeline. I think that's a pretty good thing to have.
And a lot of it was based off of the historical society across the way.
Right.
Cause they built, that was an example of the Timberland Lodge.
How controversial was it when it first came in?
It wasn't, I don't think at all. I think more controversial was the fact that they traded the land with the one down at Fred Meyer's with
Oh, sure.
picking.
Yeah.
That
was,
was, and I think I don't remember anything being controversial with that.
Well,
And they wanted it to be that.
originally on the Sandy style, on the first hearing, the place was full. And they were all many from the business community, and, I mean, they still have concerns, cost is always there. And what we ended up doing, Carl was very instrumental in this, we suggested that we maybe put together a committee of, some council members, or planning commission members, and then 2 business people from each of the zones, so having 10 business people. And we worked together for about 8 months. Juan Lazowski was one of the people that was out here, and through that process, he ended up there. So, I mean, that's kind of a win, I think, by sitting back and working together. At the end of the day, there was things that some people didn't like, and some of the bid zones had attorneys in the room, et cetera, but we came up with a consensus that everybody felt they could support.
The next one here, I'm just gonna go over this really quickly. But the elements of Sandy style, kind of as was pointed out, if you look at the Historic Society building, that's actually a really good example. Steeper roofs, different material types, shingles, rock base, a lot of stone, heavy timber, you know, kind of the black metal plates or, and some of this stuff sometimes, quite frankly, is just purely aesthetic and not actually functional or part of the building, but it kind of gives you the presence or the idea of what Sandy style looks like.
We all saw Tractor Supply go.
Right. And you haven't seen the window, you haven't seen the windows glued on yet. We didn't, by the way, we didn't know they were glued on windows. They kind of pulled that one on us. Articulated building facades, prominent covered entries, and then some of the other things that Sandy style does accomplish outside of the building realm is trying to bump buildings up to the front of the lot line, get parking behind, kind of more like a new urbanist idea, and then put more nice landscaping along the frontage of lots, put civic spots on each individual lot. So it's, when you say Sandy style, it's kind of, a lot of people think it's just the building design, but it's actually refers back to kind of the lot design and the lot layout for each lot as well.
So how did the food carts get by without doing anything?
I don't have an answer for you on that one.
Nice facade fence or something.
I think their sign is saying that.
Yeah. Why is it facing this way?
Mayor's kind of curious to that as well.
I
heard about that after the fact. I was fully part of that, but I don't remember ever being informed about that until after they went up.
So what happened, I can give you a little bit. What happened there is we did a code adoption, and then the food cart pod itself was just a staff level review.
Everyone's very excited about food carts.
Well, it was also
That's true.
kind of a trial, we wanted to see if it would work.
That's true. We had the sunset
business,
clause. Yeah.
Put into the fact we want business happening. We got a lot of working with the guy as much as we could. I think there was a lot of that going on, trying to find a way to solution.
We learn, hindsight's always 20/20, and learn from
That's right.
some of the things that maybe should have been bonded, and other things to guarantee some things after the fact.
It may show that we were certainly eager to make business happen. Sometimes when you're eager, more eager than you should be, sometimes things kind of go through the way that maybe they wouldn't. But I love the idea of seeing more business in downtown Sandy.
And to be quite honest, if you do, so before we did the code adoption, we, myself and my predecessor toured about 15 food cart pods around Portland, and I would say honestly that there's probably a handful of those that are nicer looking than what we have. So even though it's probably not the best it could be, it's actually, if you go around and tour like stuff in Gresham and different parts of Portland, there's actually a lot of stuff out there that's not as nice. So.
Damascus.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I guess I'm trying to find the silver lining in the, yeah.
What's done is done.
Exactly.
Well, it was also an odd shape property and structure that was before the food cart pods went in place. Not the greatest.
Borderline derelict, yeah.
Borderline.
So Sandy style applicability, sorry. This is kind of what you guys were asking or alluding to is anytime there's new construction it applies, replacement of a building that's destroyed it applies, addition to an existing building it applies, exterior alterations on an existing building, those alterations or those portions of the building that get altered have to have Sandy style elements included on it. And then site improvements, so when they upgrade their landscaping, change their parking lot, and stuff like that, then it triggers the requirements within chapter 1790.
What do you mean by change their parking lot? If somebody just adds parking, they may now have to do a completely new Sandy style element to their building? Or-
No. Yeah, good clarification.
Yeah.
So if they change things in the parking lot, they are supposed to, and there again, it's like, where's the threshold? So if they repaint lines, obviously they can repaint lines. If they were to add like, let's say 10 spaces on a 200 lot, you know, we'd probably only look at the 10 space area. But it only, if they're making changes, say to the parking lot, we only would require them to make modifications to the things in the parking lot. So the parking lot, the landscaping in the parking lot, and that sort of thing.
I'm getting the feeling that a lot of it is judgment call.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, I mean, so that really we don't have in our code, it it doesn't get very specific on triggers. Is what it's feeling like from this meeting. I could be wrong with that statement.
No, I think that's a fair assessment. I think we've been consistent on, in the 8+ years I've worked here, if we required on one development, we would require the same thing on the next one.
Yeah.
But, yes, I do agree that there is there's a lot of judgment calls on
So
it.
you're trying your best to be consistent.
Correct.
Right.
But yes, there is a lot of judgment call on the thresholds.
My memory goes back to the fact that I thought we said that, like the list you had here, just through the page of all these style features, we didn't have to have every single one of them installed in every building that was, met the standards of being able to put sandy style into it, but that we could choose 2/3 of them, 1/3 of them, half of them, something like that.
Well-
Is that also part of that?
Well, you try to look at it as if, like the KFC, for example, whatever they're modifying would be the things we want to see them bring into sandy style. So they were modifying like their entry, so we said, why don't you put a new entry cover? They were modifying the paint, so we said, well, the paint needs to come up to our color palette compliance.
So a partial redo is obviously just focusing on the part that is being done, but there are buildings that we've been constructed that satisfy the sandy style requirement. Do we require them to have all the features within that, or a certain percentage?
On new construction? New construction, you have to have all the features,
Every
unless
one
you,
of them?
unless you ask for a variance.
Every one of them?
Correct.
Unless you ask for a variance.
Correct.
Yeah.
I have my
The same
mind-
like any other project.
Right,
Yeah.
but I thought, I had it in my mind that we didn't require all 28 or whatever that was, points in them, and that we could say if you got.
Are you talking about the residential design centers?
No, I'm talking about commercial.
So you're thinking like if you got to 80% there,
Yeah,
that would qualify
right.
or something.
But that, you require 100%.
That's not how the code's
Yeah.
currently, yeah, the code's currently written that if it's new construction, you have to fully comply with sandy style.
One of the things that I have come across in several of the builders and owners is that sometimes the amount of work that has to be done to get the sandy style up and running in place becomes very expensive. So there doesn't appear to be as much flexibility, although tonight it appears there's a lot of flexibility. I'm wondering why I get the differences in whether it's between the builder or the city. It seems like there's a big gap of differences in opinion about.
So I'd say if it's new, I'd say if it's new construction, there isn't a lot of flexibility.
And I would
Unless,
say-
unless they bring it to planning commission and ask for variances and design deviations.
Now that I think about it, I'm probably talking mostly about reconstruction and maintenance and upgrades and stuff. People I talk to who are locals, there's not been any buildings that have been from scratch.
Yeah, so reconstruction, yeah. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I don't know how you would write the code. I don't know, I mean, we can explore it. I just don't know how, without going through the exercise of trying to rewrite the code, I don't know how you'd write the code to have thresholds.
Right, I mean,
But this is.
no, I was just saying, so I think like right now what you do is, right, is there's a code, you gotta follow code, then you apply for some variances and deviations. For example, if there's the backside of it isn't very visible, maybe we don't need to do all the sandy
Right.
style elements, but that's why we have a volunteer commission, right, of citizens who then make those decisions on variances.
But when you first come into the business of presenting, you're required to have a new construction, all of the different features.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that there is a differences in perception. I thought this was a matter of looking at the code and seeing if there were ways that we can make the sandy style work, but maybe make it a little bit easier, or maybe look at for some of the difficulties that we have implemented.
You mean tonight's meeting?
No, not tonight, but as we walk us through.
Yeah, I think we could progress in that direction. I think just for tonight, it was just to get some background and history.
Kind of bring everybody up to speed
Just
to
bring-
what a couple of us have had a long history in it, but others are brand new.
No decision tonight, I got that from the
Yeah.
instructions, but it's one of those things that's in the back of my mind, is
Yeah.
if there's a way to make it easier, but still make sure the sandy style is well represented.
And I agree with what you said there. I look back from the beginning, and every new construction has been complete with the sandy style. I was thinking of the gym, was one of the first things when I got on planning commission, but that was prior.
Yeah, it's not sandy style.
It's not sandy,
Mhm.
but no, there are so many features that are
Yeah.
sandy style, that I remember talking about this, hey, we are the sandy style coming, and Paul wanted to put those things in there. That was a great idea, and, made his building look great. The first one that happened, though, was Walgreens.
No, that was right before sandy style too.
No, they
It was
had.
the year before.
Are you serious?
Well, yeah, no, I was on planning, it was on, yeah, you're right.
It was before
Walgreens
Sandy Style.
was?
Yeah, but we made them do the beams, and they didn't want to do that.
Well, I think
We were
correct me if I'm
putting it
wrong,
in.
but I think
You're
when
right, though.
Walgreens was being built, or
No,
not
you're
built,
right.
when it was going through land use approval, we told them we had draft design requirements, but they
Okay.
weren't officially adopted, I don't.
Yeah, you're right, because the timeline's there, and I was on planning for it.
So they moved that direction on their own?
Yeah, they had to.
I don't know how we
Well-
convinced them of that, I didn't
Yeah,
work
yeah.
there, but yeah.
I know they weren't happy with the open beams, but we convinced them.
But they're in other cities that have similar
Oh,
building codes.
they
to
did.
us,
In fact, they
you know,
brought
So
it.
I would think they'd have a raw template.
It's a quick pivot.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, well, they were mad, they were like, no, this is it, and then we had someone driving through north of Seattle bringing back one, well, look at the one up here.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh crud, yeah.
Yeah.
We do those other
But
places.
Walgreens is a completely different deal than local entrepreneur.
Oh, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Quick question,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So how much flack do you think that you get over the course of time with a lot of things being judgment call?
I mean, I guess, I don't know how to answer that, because I don't really
I mean,
keep
it's-
track of it, but it is a lot.
I just would think it would leave, I mean, that's,
However, if we don't have judgment call, then I would hate that, because it wouldn't give us the ability to use common sense either.
provided common sense is being used.
But-
I'm not
but-
saying that
but-
it's not, I'm
but-
just saying,
But the common sense is in the eye of the beholder also.
exactly, that's kind of where I'm going.
Well, that's really,
Yeah.
that's right, but at the same time, we haven't had that much new, now, especially now that I've just learned that Walgreens wasn't built under this, we haven't had that much new construction, brand new
Well, but
construction
not even
under
just
the
talking
same
new
style.
construction, I mean, if you're
Yeah.
talking about even just remodels, you know, and you're
Yeah.
leaving a lot of things up to judgment,
Oh,
then you're
sure.
leaving a lot of things, and so I guess where I'm going with that is that it makes me question if some of the, negative publicity that the city gets as far as like media overlook and things like that is partially due because anytime you leave things up to somebody else's judgment and it's not real black and white,
Mm.
you leave yourself open to criticism, right?
You lack the ability to
Yeah.
have fallback documentation.
Absolutely, absolutely, you know, and I'm just questioning,
Yeah.
it's not,
It's competing interests here, right? So the
Always.
goal of Sandy Style is to create a sense of place with that style, that design, right?
Sure.
And so the interpretation when someone comes in and says, I'm gonna do something to my building, here's that something. We might interpret that more as, this is beyond just general maintenance because you're changing this, this, and this to your facade.
Sure.
So it's gonna trigger you to do Sandy Style. Whereas their interest is gonna be, no, this is general maintenance. I'm just changing,
oh, no, I totally understand that,
Right.
and don't get me wrong, I like Sandy Style, I'm a huge proponent of the Sandy Style, it's just a
Well,
general
yeah.
question that I have.
And
Well, I
I'm
think
just
because-
kinda, just trying to
Yeah.
explain a little bit about why that interpretation maybe is seen differently from different sides,
Sure,
right?
absolutely. And
we're
that's always
arguing
gonna be
over what
the
is
case,
maintenance.
Well, tell me if I'm wrong, I think part of what you're weighing is part of what I'm weighing in my head as we go through this, which is always that debate between, do you want a really strict code?
Right.
So that you can literally, it's in black and
Move
white
forward,
here and there, but it's very
right.
stringent
Right.
versus something.
But
that
you
can
want some
have-
flexibility, right?
And there's give and take with that.
Absolutely.
There's probably times when we haven't pushed as hard as we could on
Sure.
Oh, okay.
having Sandy Style.
Well, the Sandy is unique in the fact that we use urban renewal to turn around and say, yeah, this is required in your upgrading of it, but hey, we'll grant you some money
Sure,
to do that.
absolutely.
Or the
What other city does that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
There is a few others that, yeah, I don't think many.
Thanks.
But they're asking us about it.
A lot of cities talk about Sandy net, because they wanna do, but they don't.
That's
You guys can do it.
Already in the pre-meeting twice. We've already gone with how long you've been on council and.
Did he say that?
No, he brought that up.
You
Twice.
guys,
I mean,
as
we're
I
not
was
even
on
in
the
council
run,
yet.
as I was on the run earlier.
I love how much you guys
I've
love
actually-
me. That
I've
you
been
can
running-
just,
I've been running a mile
you can just
every
give
year
me a
on
hard
council.
time, I do appreciate it.
Who is the oldest counselor anyway?
I do appreciate it.
Who has been around? Who's been around the longest?
Because if you didn't love me,
I
you
just
wouldn't say anything
like the
about
fact that
it.
you got it out of the way already.
Somewhere, Brittany's having to take a lot of shots on her drink bingo.
All right, we got him out of the way.
All right, back on.
Who's chairman?
At least we're out in the open with it, right?
Hey, I'd rather,
They
I
don't,
can laugh at
they don't
myself.
do this at school board.
Okay, we should probably move on.
If you wanna go to the next slide. So, in saying all of that, there are some exemptions to the rules. We've already covered general maintenance pretty heavily. Residential, we do have design standards for residential, but they are not as restrictive as the commercial zones or the industrial zones. So they're a little bit more restrictive for multifamily, and then for single family, they just have to meet a number of design elements depending on their garage width, and we almost never get any pushback on any. Like pretty much all of that's pretty easy to meet, with the exception of the multifamily section has a few little tweaks I'd like to make, but for the predominantly the residential sandy style section of our code, we get almost zero negative feedback on.
Oh, yeah.
Like almost nothing.
I was always told Tollgate was kind of in, like, a lot of those styles were implemented into our code, but they're still an exception.
Yeah, so,
By,
and then that's a good one too, yeah, so we do have some exemptions, for specific properties. It's the Tollgate, Joe's Donuts, and then on Pioneer, on the south side of Pioneer, there's some buildings like,
White buildings.
yeah, the white, there you go. And then the old, yeah, the IOOF hall that used to exist, that's still listed in there, but it doesn't exist, so,
Torn down by the fire.
yeah.
These, but however, they're all exceptions to the code.
Correct.
They're not alternative styles.
Correct.
Yes.
Exactly.
So what it was,
So
was
those, yeah.
they
Never
were,
taken down, though.
they're historical, everyone knows Joe's Donuts.
Yes.
You go anywhere, they don't know the name of our town, but they know you get donuts here in Mountain. And that was called out specifically, as well as these, Tollgate. I think Ron was on the planning too, so they've been a little bit, the western style there, because it's not
Right.
sandy style, it was kind of, something you find in Sisters, but, other than that. One question I had though, and I can't remember what it turned out to be, when we did talk about it, if a building were to burn down, can it build up exactly the same way it was, or does it have to meet sandy style? And the only reason why I ask that is because insurance companies.
Ordinance and code coverage, you usually have about $250,000.
Do you?
coverage.
Okay, cause I know some houses and whatever that we've heard that you can't change that much, you know more, so.
Yeah, and our,
Say that again, can you repeat that?
Stan knows a lot more than I know.
our nonconformity section would say that if it I think it's 80%. So if it burns down beyond that, then everything on the site has to come up to conformance. And if it gets burned down less than that, and I don't know how that assessment's done, but if it gets burned down less than that, then they can rebuild as it was.
Okay.
So if one of those white buildings got burned down quite a bit, we would say you can't bring it back as a white building, it would have to be sandy style?
Well, it's an exception.
Yeah, you could bring, the specific
Those-
property is called out as an exemption, so I don't think it's really exempting the building, it's exempting the property. So I think the property, you could come back and put a white building on it.
Cause we talked about Joe's burning down, and that they could build the same
Yep.
Right.
ugly red and white,
I-
beautiful,
I-
not ugly, beautiful,
I-
red and white building.
Unique.
Same sound.
Big brown
Because
one.
it is sandy.
Think about that, I almost lost my life over that.
All right.
Bad smoke.
Next slide. So I just want to go through some pictures mainly now, and then we can follow up with some more questions. So the Sandy Starbucks, which was originally approved as the Sandy Jack in the Box.
That's what the Jack in the Box.
Yeah. So 2009, that was constructed. I think it almost entirely follows Sandy style with maybe the exception of the building frontage requirement.
Perfect example of who cares what company's coming in. You end up with a great looking building.
Oh, Starbucks was
Yeah.
like, yes, we get the.
Oh,
building.
Starbucks jumped all
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Jack in the Box was really having struggles, so I just remember that.
Till last
So
few months.
never anybody there, when Starbucks took over, they got parking in the business across the street.
The Sandy Public Library was another one. I don't think we need to go into a discussion about the roof color.
Come on. No,
We go to the next page.
Starting to
The,
come down.
yeah, the Sandy Goodwill, again, the Sandy Goodwill and the Wendy's both followed Sandy style. So that, like, that's a good example of one that didn't even go to planning commission, and that's a pretty big development,
What one?
Sandy Goodwill. And that's because they followed our code. So, and if
There's
you
no
follow.
variance on the roof on that one?
Yeah, it looked
No.
like they spared no expense.
That, they did not.
Yeah, I mean.
And they're pretty proud of it, to be
Yeah,
honest, yeah.
they should be.
They actually bring down some executives down there to look at that one, for example, of what they're trying to aim to do.
Well, Panda Express didn't come to us either. Panda Express, Jack in the Box, none of those came from the planning commission.
Cause they weren't asking for design exceptions yet.
Yeah, they would come to us if they want an exception.
Panda Express, 2009, so that was about the same time as the Starbucks. Wanna go to the next one? Next adventure, this,
That's interesting.
David went and took these pictures, so this is an interesting one, and I wanna thank David, he put together this whole slideshow for us tonight, so.
Sounds like
the-
a 7,000 square foot addition on a 1,000 square foot.
1,000 is a little generous.
And then I was just waiting for the building in front to go away.
So, good news on this one is the building in front is expected to go away next year, hopefully, and then he's going to
So
connect.
it's a remodel.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, remodel.
Ingenuity.
Tricky.
And then Fresenius Medical Clinic 2014, they pretty much followed the code to a T as well. That's right behind the,
That one I think is a little questionable.
Yeah.
it does meet the code.
Color's different.
I do think,
Threw a little fake timber there.
yeah, I agree, yeah.
I don't know, I just.
Yeah, it's
but
like-
then, whatever.
Just doesn't stand out as Sandy South.
It's just very blockage, like there's, a lot of big wall there. which
I
didn't
can't
thought
tell you
meant
on-
the Sandy style.
Yeah.
Did
on-
the stone facade down below.
yeah.
So, anyway.
On that one, you should have seen the first, what they sent us, so the first edition of what they sent us. It was a far cry from that. And then the City of Sandy Facade Improvement Program, we just wanted to run through this. I think most of you know how this works. But it was also launched in 2009, when, right around the same time, I think the year after Sandy Style was. The economy was in a downturn. I think the planning department at the time had less applications coming in, so they launched this program and got a lot of changes in the downtown while the economy was down. And this is a reimbursement program. How we're currently doing it is, it's a matching program. Back in 2009, they did do some of the new buildings that got renovated at a 99 to 1% match. So all the property owner would have to put down is 1%, and the city did the other 99. We've since kind of decided to go away from that, just because it spreads the costs around a lot better if you do the match program. So right now, how it works is you can get rewarded up to $41,500 in reimbursement. And then we believe there's at least 30 buildings in the downtown Sandy that have benefited from this program, and then a few other ones outside of downtown Sandy.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah,
This,
go ahead.
was also only in the downtown couplet. It didn't go the other direction, back when it started. Also, the urban renewal district was only in the downtown, district and didn't go down there, so it couldn't be used, nor were we collecting, the funds for that. And right before this started, we also did the urban renewal fund, first big cost was the undergrounding project. So a lot of the all the communication lines through the downtown couplet got put underground, and when they did that, they ripped up, remember, all the sidewalks, and businesses were frustrated or were going out of business because they couldn't get people from the cars in there because they ripped up all the sidewalks. And we did it, and that's where a lot of the facade on the sidewalks, the city actually paid for all that. So the light poles and that type of thing in front of those businesses got upgraded. Then we came back and started doing this with the facades to match that, so it was kind of this continuum.
Nice.
So that was when they ripped that up and they put all that stuff on the ground. That was when they, what's the name of that project that we did here? Put the thing in there and it goes to houses.
The fiber? You playing with that? Playing with me. Playing with
Took
me.
you a minute.
No, I was, you guys were, yes, wait.
Did I get anybody else on that one?
Oh, I knew.
I knew where you're going with that. So yeah,
Jordan's already laughing like before I started saying 3
we
words.
put duct work up there and begged people to take the fiber. Anyway, why we had it all ripped up, but yes, that was part of it.
They're gonna owe you something to the manager.
How many houses buildings do you think we have left over downtown that are not part of the Sandy facade?
A lot more.
I'm
quite a bit.
Yeah.
50-55%.
And the run.
So about 40-something percent.
I guess about, maybe a little less than that.
Some of the really rough ones really stand out. Like there's some-
I think a few of the ones that need Sandy style upgrades, I won't name by name, but
Sure.
I think in the beginning, and you guys were probably part of this, we actually hired, I think it was that Sedell group.
Ralph?
Siegel.
Like Oswego.
Yeah, Lake Oswego. We hired them to come out and do an assessment of all the downtown buildings and then make a priority rankings list. I still have it at my desk. But I think a few of the ones that never got done were listed as high priority, but the most expensive. And I think that's why some of them.
Or we had business owners that didn't trust the city.
Right.
One way or the other, and what happened was over time, they saw their neighbors get, whoa, you got a lot done, yours, come do mine, and come do mine, And so we did allow those, and man, people that said, we are not gonna do any of this, then came and were begging to be part of the program. And so.
Well, part of the problem also in that was that as the last nail was being installed into the facade, the tax assessor was out there writing up his little additional, increase in taxes. So there was some of that kind of stuff happening. And I think that had some impact on some of the folks that decided not to do that right away. But again, I think most people look downtown, even the ones that say that Sandy style is way too expensive, people are really buying into it. Because it makes Sandy look so well.
Well, part of it's to guilt others into updating their buildings, right? And I've just gotta feel like, as I drive through downtown, the guilt factor's gotta be there. I mean, we've hit pretty good critical mass with some key improvements and projects.
It was great going to C4, going to the city's dinner everywhere, and you're like, Sandy, oh, I love that. Man, you've done amazing, unbelievable. And I think
I get that all
we
the
used to
time,
do,
too.
in one of our city dinners, I know it's this Thursday, but we had out here, and Tracy had gone through the whole program with, and we do these type of things for new councils. I think one of a great demonstration is the before and after shots of buildings. And I know you don't have that here, and I don't know if it's in the archives.
We have it, yeah.
It would, you've got the one right there where the boring brewery was at, and you've got these other ones, that before and after shot is like, oh wow, this is a great program. This is really, has done what it said it needed to do in the last 15 years, right? Or less than that, actually. Really well.
Yeah, about 12 years.
We wouldn't beating ourselves in the back too much, patting ourselves there. But citizens love it as well, and that really makes me excited.
That's why they move here.
Folks in the residential part of the world love our downtown the way it looks. I don't hear anybody in the residential side of the world saying they don't like what's going on downtown.
That's why they moved here. A lot of people.
And really, our residential style is really, all the craftsmen.
Well, that's what you see.
Every-
Creates a brand.
So just to run through a few of these, some of the more recent and some of the best examples. The Shell station was one of our more recent ones in 2017. Although I think it could easily be argued it was one of the biggest impacts as well, because it's right at the couplet there. So you see it every time you drive into downtown.
I didn't even know that the store had a name inside there, the market.
I think they created it.
I think they created it, yeah.
They branded
Roots?
It's like
Yeah.
some breakfast burrito place, right? Should've gone.
And then Ace Harbor, which was mentioned.
Yeah.
And then on the next page, the La Mama Mexican restaurant, if you remember what that building used to look like.
And that was the first one off-site on Pleasant Street.
And then the fire station.
So a question on this, so I think as you're hearing, big fans of the Sandy style, kind of where it's taking our community. We're, and as Carl said, we don't hear a lot of the complaints from our residents. Because, well, heck, I was one of them that wasn't a huge fan of it, and then started seeing the change, right, of our downtown, and became more and more of a fan. I think a lot of people are that way. But as I look at what you showed me, a lot of these pictures, we've got pictures of the front of these buildings. And so they all look really nice on the appearance up front. And I think what's instigated a lot of this ones that were new, but others is kind of the lack of some new construction and some complaints we've heard on new construction and stuff, and some of the cost factors with the Sandy style element. So as we move forward, as we think about some of the parts of the building that are less public facing, sides of buildings, rears of buildings, as we windows, obviously that's always a debate, how many windows to have. The type of material that we're using versus some cheaper material versus some of the more expensive wood materials. Where can we take this where we still can keep the integrity? Is there any options, I guess, where we can keep the integrity of the style, keep moving our community in a direction that we all seem to really be excited and happy about, but create something that's more cost effective for the economy and businesses to thrive and develop and really get going here in our downtown. I think you've had some recommendations you're thinking about. What are some things that we can do?
I think, I think the first thing that I would tackle if I was to set a priority list would probably be to change the I2 zone for Sandy style. Right now, basically what it says for the I2 zone, that's our heaviest industrial that we have in town. It's mostly down in the hole and then on Industrial Way, and there's a little bit on, no, it's all on Industrial Way. 362nd, there's a little on 362nd. One of the things I would like to do is the code currently says you have to screen the property. So I would like to do away with a lot of the Sandy style requirements in there. Right now, we make them do a 312 roof pitch. every single new building, and we have 2 more coming up, they all want a 112 or less. And that's because when you do these web steel manufactured buildings, they don't do them with a 312. So to get a 312 roof pitch, you have to have it custom engineered and designed, and then custom built. So, and it just makes the cost double, is from what I've heard, for these structures. So I think the I2 zone, if we're trying to increase employment lands and increase living wage jobs here in town, that's the first one I would tackle. Because I think it has some easy wins, and I think it has, you know, if we're gonna require them to screen the property anyways, I think we can get rid of a lot of the Sandy style requirements in the code section.
And just do it for the one zone.
Do it for the I2, correct?
I2. And you're not talking screening that's already there, like, along the backside where the school district's property and all that hides all that industrial.
So that has to be maintained.
That has to be maintained.
That's an easement.
But that's not a Sandy style, that was an easement, that's
Correct. So for example, if you drive down Industrial Way, we all know it's very industrial, and it should be, that's what the zone is.
Industrial way.
Yeah. But right now, if you put a new building, you have to do like a bunch of articulation on the buildings, you have to have a clear path from the front of the building to the street, which is a great idea if the building is gonna be used by the public. But if it is purely a building that's just gonna be like manufacturing, we don't really see the big benefit of that. You have to have a 312 roof pitch, which I explained is very expensive. There's a few little things I would leave in there, but by and large, you could get rid of most of the design requirements.
Industrial way, it's an interesting example, but I think it's also a hard challenge because we intermix so much commercial coming off of industrial as well, as far as kind of the cohesive look that we're going for. But
And then after that, I would really say that we should probably take a look at both the multifamily and then also the C2 and the I1, and start looking at some of the requirements in there that pretty much everybody wants variances to. And the big one that we always run up against is the articulation.
What do you mean, like, describe articulation?
Yeah, so the multifamily is the prime one, that every 20 feet of building surface, you have to have a change in elevation of 8 feet. And a lot of times, if we kind of poll different developers, a lot of times they build the sections that are flat and long, longer than 20 feet.
Yeah.
So usually they're 24 or 26, and that's why they all request variations to it, because nobody built a 20-foot section on an apartment complex.
Where the 20 feet come from?
I don't know, I'd have to
It's
do a
nice
lot of
round
research.
number.
Yeah.
I'm curious, does anyone
It
keep
might be
track?
that simple.
Does anyone keep track of the variances and kind of point, you know, where our variances are coming from? Like, we're getting, you know, 90% of our variances are based on a pitched roof versus.
We haven't, like, do we have it in a matrix? No, but
Yeah.
we do know what we've been doing, so we can put it together relatively easy.
And so your comment there is basically in the C2 and the I2?
I1.
Or the I1?
And the multifamily R3.
And the multifamily R3.
And I don't know what the numbers should be yet, we'd have to research it more, but that would be something I think we need to explore.
So the C2 is, C1 is the couplets.
Yeah, not the C1, the C2.
Right, I'm just
Yeah.
letting everyone know, if you're not used to it, the C2 is from Bluff Road that way to the rest of the commercial on 26. And then the I2 is what you're saying.
So what
It's
else?
Industrial Way.
I1.
Or I1, I'm sorry, Industrial Way.
The theater and
Theater.
Champion Way and something.
Which, I was chairing a committee years ago when Lasby was here about how to take some of those zoning requirements of what you could do in that to give it more of a commercial look, because everyone wanted to sell pastry or, you know,
Can I just add
something like
one more
that,
thing?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I would do is really prioritize from I2 backwards. And because I2 is the least concern really for what it looks like, since this property has to be screened, and I think it would make a quick impact for development. And then I would work the other way. I wouldn't really, honestly, without looking at the code, I wouldn't change much to your C1 Sandy style. But that's just my feeling on it, but, I mean, we could explore it. But I think most of what we hear, most of the requests we get are in the other zone classifications.
Is parking in C1 part of the Sandy style?
Kind of,
Or is that
in relationship to
another
where it's
issue?
on the site, but the requirement on how many space you need to have, that's in a separate section.
Separate section.
That's another thing I'm gonna be exploring with planning commission next week, so.
Okay, because if it was, I'd like to.
How about the shift in funding and how we've modified our percentage of business owner expense from when it first started for the SOD program to now? Would you make modifications to that? I know you said you had a list of all the businesses originally when there was an assessment done. would you recommend modifications to that of the percentage that the, urban renewal funds, to that maximum of 41.5 to move along some additional businesses into completing a project, or?
I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's gonna, obviously, as you already know, is it's gonna come down to what your guys' priority are for all those monies, but I think it's worth looking at.
Have we considered removing the colors from City Hall off of the color palette?
Yeah.
Has there been some comment about that?
Yes, there has.
Just
wait a few years.
My wife's comment.
Waiting for the rains to wash it off. So other things that may not be popular, but just to bring them up, you know, something that I've heard is that sometimes, you know, with the adding the elements to the facades and even some of the new construction, it doesn't look like an authentic Cascadia style Oregon rustic if you compare like Timberline Lodge or whatever. And some of that has to do with the use of that building. You know, it just isn't conducive to having windows when you're a retailer or something, or a bank or whatever. You don't.
Yeah, but you glue 'em on.
So you glue on windows, right? And that doesn't look authentic. And even some of the beams coming out of the building, where you can see that's a brick building. There's no beams that are as part of the structure, but it's made to look like that. Doesn't necessarily look authentic. Now it looks a lot better than it did, but I think where I'm going with this is, you know, one thing that maybe after, you know, over a decade of one style is to think about, is there modifications to the style to allow more, you know, I don't know, other styles that are compatible with the Oregon rustic Cascadian style. This is obviously a bigger effort or whatever to bring those in. But also, I mean, it is, you know, there's been a couple buildings built when, you know, I've heard comments that it doesn't look, you know, so much like that Cascadian style that we're trying to capture. It looks more like a box with some of those elements strapped, you know, onto the top. And there's, you know, real cost to adding a 312 pitch roof as opposed to a flat roof, you know, with some awnings and things like that. On the variance process, I would just say, you know, it makes sense when you have like 100% are getting that variance, whatever. It's sort of like, yeah, I mean, if no one is complying, then great. Like, might as well just, you know, bake that into the code. But at the same time, the variance process is a way for the public to comment on that variance and to weigh in on it. And, I mean, that's why the process exists, right? Is you have, you know, your aspiration, what you want them to build and what the code, you know, says. But they have to make that case for doing something different. And in most cases, they've been successful in making that case, right? So that, you know, I would say the variance process is actually kind of working, you know, to allow some flexibility to the Sandy style. I think that's the points I want to make. So I don't have an answer for what the different styles might be, but I've heard, you know, there's different parts of town that have some of those old, different, like, historic periods where the town was built, and maybe, you know, it might make sense to stretch it a little bit, you know, to allow more masonry buildings or something like that in those areas. But
One of my questions was, does every building need to have art? Does every building have to have
civic spaces.
A civic space and
That-
and a bench? I know it does by code, but I'm saying more kind of out loud. Does every building, I mean, there's one that's just glaring in my head that I don't want to say out loud, but if I show up to a building, I'm not going there to sit and look at art and wait for the bus.
Well, and I
It's
think
not gonna interact with the community in that way.
And I think at the very least, that section needs to be looked at harder, because I know exactly the building you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think depending on the use, we should limit the amount of civic space. And we, on one of the buildings I think you're talking about, we did give them a variance, because it didn't make sense to have a 2,000 square foot civic space for it.
Right.
So yeah, I think that needs to be looked at very hard.
But you don't wanna take it out of the code, because there's the 99% of everybody else that does make sense to us, right?
And you may wanna be specific about what your smart way of doing things are. In that, you don't want it in this particular building, then maybe you do want it even more in another place in the city. And I think being purposeful about what you wanna do with our art and what you wanna do with our leisure space and that kind of stuff in downtown, or even in our residential areas, needs to be smart about that. Rather than always having it or never having it. Those are too far out of the pendulum. You find someplace where you're smart, people like you're smart. For example, I think that we need to try hard to put this village zone into place well before I was in planning commission. And what, we got one not been sold because of the requirement of putting commercial into relatively illogical stuff. So there may be other zoning changes that might help us to get past some of these impediments.
That was one of our goals. That's a different topic, but to relook at that.
Yeah, I don't bring it up to talk about tonight, but there are other things.
So you went over landscaping. So what is a sandy style landscape?
We try to make it like drought tolerant plants, and then it's the mixture and the depth and the width along the road right away. So instead of just having street trees, it requires that, for example, on the C2, that 20 feet in front of the building, between the building and the lot line, has to be landscaped to a certain mixture and to a certain species type. So it's kind of like what they just did in front of O'Reilly's. Before they just had grass, and now they've added a bunch of trees and shrubs and stuff. That's kind of what it is.
Ask me about weeding.
Yeah.
You ever seen a bunch of people in uniform out weeding?
Yeah.
Keeps you busy.
Are they, do they need to be native or just drought resistant?
What does it put exactly say on that?
A lot of the large shrubs are native, some of the trees are, but not all. It says native or Pacific Northwest tolerant, climate adapted, basically.
The real issue is invasive or not. We've got invasive non-native. That's really a big issue. A lot of our natives do not compete sometimes. So I can think of a couple of situations in other towns where the non-native invasives really took over.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, 2 minutes. We all good?
Thank
Hey,
you,
Kelly,
everybody.
good presentation.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank David, everybody, because he's the one that put this presentation together.
I look forward to seeing a couple of those that you mentioned, or planning amendments.
Under the proposed rate would be 48.89, but if they come in prior to the effective
You're right,
date of
okay,
this,
right,
we're
I
only
get
gonna
that,
collect
right,
18.
good. All right.
So
And then
yeah, we
the-
would never see that.
We'd never see that, okay, got it. And then the 90 days is really more of just getting it out there to the beginning of the calendar year, right? There's no reason for a 90 days or 91.
Well,
The
I think
the
some of
reason
the-
for that was coming
in the
off of
last
public
meeting,
comment and the
people
ability to
testified.
secure financing.
Correct, but there's no requirement for us to say 90 days. It needs to be passed before we.
You can pick any day you want.
Any day we want, okay, sorry.
Or any time span or date you want.
Right. Okay.
Counselor Lee?
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if this is something you could answer, but when I was looking at it, it looked to me like the increase was less than 1% of the cost of a home, so to speak. So passing that on to the homeowner, I'm having a hard time seeing how that really impacts the financing in any significant way.
I'd say that $300,000 is probably pretty typical for a single
Yeah.
family. Even single family attached dwellings, those are typically, like with a valuation right around $300K.
So we're looking at a 1% increase in cost.
I mean, there may be more to that, like I said.
That's a question to pose
we have
before
some
public
people
testimony.
in the audience that may, it may be more that, not more money, but it may be maybe other issues other than the
Yeah.
price.
Okay, any other questions before we go to public testimony? All right, let's go to public testimony. Opportunity for public testimony. Remember to come up to the podium, state your name, address for the record, and I'll provide 5 minutes. A little longer if we have some Q&A. Any public comment? Welcome back.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilors. My name is Levi Lavasa. I work for Stafford Development Company. Our address is 8840 Southwest Holly Lane, Wilsonville, Oregon, 97070. Good to be back. Thank you for continuing the hearing. It gave me an opportunity to kind of catch up on some of what was going on in the facilities master plan, alternative D, and all those things. Just to start, very supportive of the increase. I think everybody is on board with that, including the HBA of Metro Portland. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of needs that have to be taken care of. And again, that additional time that we're requesting just gives us time to adapt, especially since we are just about to record the plat for our project. So we really have been waiting to submit and do a lot of building permits. So having that extra time does give us time to get in permits as planned under the system development charges and permit fees that we had anticipated. I would appreciate a similar treatment of building permits as to how they are now, where you collect the fees based on when they're submitted. I think it makes sense that if somebody totally changes their plan, that you change the assessed fee to what it is now. I think that's, we don't want to play that game. Obviously, we want to try and get our permits in so we're under the lower fee, but I think there's some obvious operating in good faith that should be followed, and that this city should have the ability to change how that fee is assessed if the plan completely changes. One concern, and I don't know in great detail, I read some of the facilities master plan and how the capital improvements program is adopted. I believe last time at the beginning that's what was adopted, and I had mentioned it, and I don't think it was really caught, was the methodology and just what was included as expansion and what was included in the system development charge calculation as just upgrading or
plan.
I guess operations and maintenance of existing infrastructure. So I would like clarity. I tried to read it and find it, but there was no real evidence on these improvements that are getting added right now as the additional costs. There was no, this is what the capacity is now, and this is what these improvements will make the capacity. And it needs to be an expansion of capacity for it to be something that can go on the SDCs as an improvement. I don't know what the terminology is exactly, but there's improvement and there's reimbursement for system development charges, and everything on here is improvement. And so I just wanted to know what exactly that improvement is. There's got to be a number. I mean, if there's a capacity change, that's what justifies the improvement and expansion in the cost, and I think that makes sense. I'm just curious what that is. And I'm sure it's an easy number that they can pull up and say this is how much capacity we're adding with all the things that we're putting on the current increase. I know there will be another one once the satellite plan is completed, so I know that'll increase again. But right now, it's all based on what's changing on the existing wastewater treatment plant. So I just wanted to make sure that everything that's being included actually is expanding capacity, not just fixing it to the same capacity it was before. Or at least it was intended to when Kern McLeod designed it in, I think, 2003 and 7, something like that. So, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, let's see, you want to stand for
Yeah.
some questions? All right. Anybody else have? Yep, Councilor Lane?
Yes, could you help me understand why 1% increase in the overall cost would cause significant financing problems?
Yeah, so it's not, Mike's right, it wasn't all just financing problems. For us, that's, we have 37 lots in our project. Unfortunately, I'm not in the home building department, so I don't know exactly how much it costs us to build a house. But I know that $3,000 per lot increase in system development charges for us ends up being almost $100 grand, which is significant in any business. I don't know where that wouldn't be a significant amount. So that's where it's just, it was a surprise, and what caught us off guard initially was, whoa, that's $100 grand on this project. And home building is generally a pretty thin margin. It's better than a farmer, but for home building, it's pretty narrow. And I'm not familiar with the exact margin. I know they want to be over 10 and hopefully close to 15, but so 1% is pretty significant. And on top of that, I mean, system development charges aren't an imperfect thing, obviously. You'd think that gets passed on to the home buyer eventually, right? And so that in turn is increasing the value of a home artificially that they're putting on a 30-year mortgage, that eventually that $3,000 that it goes up over that 30 years, somebody's paying $9 grand for it or $6 grand or whatever. So, I mean, it's not all just about the financing to build a home. There's several things that kind of play into it. So.
Additional questions?
Mike, did you have numbers?
Yeah, that's on page, since this was on the prior agenda, I didn't include the attachment of this one. So, you'd have to, we could go back to the original, the October 7th packet, but at any rate, it's on page 6 of Exhibit A, and the improvement fee, cost of future capacity, is $26.5 million. And, by state law, we can't, we can only charge SDCs for increases in capacity. We can't use it for operations costs, we can't use it for salaries, we can't use it for administrative facilities. It can only be used to make pipes bigger, make roads wider, make treatment plants larger. It can't be used for existing capacity, only for new capacity. And that's laid out here. And we do not collect a reimbursement fee. This is pretty typical for most of our systems development charges. We have a lot of contributed assets. It was either financed with some government financing or grants, or the depreciated value actually is so small, it doesn't really make a big difference to include a reimbursement fee. And so it's very difficult to calculate those, so sometimes it's more trouble than it's worth to include a reimbursement fee. So there is no reimbursement fee in this charge. It's only for capacity building improvements.
So, for example, the condition assessment improvements to $2.5 million in phase 1 for the existing plant is not SDC eligible. Same with the I&I work. SDCs money are not going towards that.
Yeah, there's a table actually on page 5 of Exhibit A that kind of shows for each capital improvement how much is eligible for SDC and what percentage, and some are 0, some are 14%, some are 100%. So it lists by project.
Just a quick question. We've really fixated on this 90-day thing. Like, it's even in the staff report a couple times. This would be 91 days. This would be 86 days. So you guys are the ones that brought up 90 days. Thank you for that. What's the significance of it? Because I think when we come up with the day and stuff, what's the significance of 90 days?
Yeah, somewhat arbitrary, but it gives us a few months to realize what's going on and make the adjustments we need. I guess set our
So
expectations
more importantly, it's
appropriately.
deep breath. You need to take a breath, look around.
Right,
Yep.
and it gives us time to actually adjust our budgets, because I mean, they don't, for when it goes across 37 lots, $100,000 becomes pretty important. I mean, It's just like saying the price per square foot goes up by 5 cents. It's gonna expand across.
Yeah, I'm looking at a difference between January 6th and January 1st, so if we're getting that minute, right,
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that there wasn't
Right,
some.
no,
Yeah.
I think either would be
Yeah.
appreciated.
Okay.
This is granite versus laminate
Right.
on the countertops.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Real quick? Just, I understand, I saw the tables in the report and the exhibits they're referencing, and I couldn't find where there was an increase in capacity
Okay.
or something that said so.
Mhm.
And that's just what I was looking for, because I just knew that was one of the criteria, it needs to increase capacity, so I was curious, what is that increased capacity from those things that are included?
No, I appreciate you bringing that up. I have it written down here. It's a great point that we need to make sure is really out there in the open.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Oh, yeah, more public comment, sorry. There's only so many of you out there.
Yeah, hi, my name's Jim Rays, Rays Custom Homes. I'm 4020 Northeast 216th Avenue in Fairview. I'll be super short and sweet. I echo nearly everything that Levi has said. Charges, costs going up. I understand that's gonna happen. I'm hoping that we also, the comment of maybe a small amount from a percentage of the overall, it's not the same number when we are looking at a bottom line. We hope you view us as partners in building the city. Some notice really, which was kind of my position talking with you guys last time, is the ability to get acclimated to the change. And with all due respect, a few $1,000s. I know we have one broker on the panel here, and seeing what homes are costing out here. The last half of my portion of Zion, there wasn't a home in there that sold under $450,000 for entry-level homes in Sandy. Everything matters. Would you pay $3,000 more for something that you get no aesthetic appreciation for? I understand those costs are going to go. We're going to have to acclimate to that. But if we do attempt or are successful at pushing that on, we want to maintain affordability out here. I would hope that the draw is what you guys want, and the activity and market share out here continues to absorb, and it's absorbing out here arguably quicker than some other markets. And then in Mike's comment, just the worst case scenario, I think reality being for the bigger players, and I'm not speaking for Levi, I think they've got a different plan, but the loss, if the city's looking at it that way, I think that would be an absolute worst case scenario. And knowing a little bit of what's not my business, I don't see all those permits coming in that 90 days. We agree with your comment. We don't want to oversaturate the market either. That works against us as well. So that's all I have. So thank you. Thank you. Yes.
How many permits do you think you might put in the next 90 days?
Myself here, I will only have a handful of permits. So I'll have 6 permits in the day that I'm buying those lots from Levi. Whether there's another phase there to be determined, but we are in discussions with other stuff. I'm just really commenting on what is available or near completion as of now.
Thank you.
Okay?
And I'll just echo what you said before, which stuck with me, was that you've already penciled out those 6 lots for banking parts, and that affects that financing aspect.
I'm the small fish in this conversation. I guess what I'm hoping is a voice of, I'm not the 20-year veteran, but I've been out here consistently since '06. I intend to continue to work out here, and it's been overall good experience. And you just hope that we can understand maybe just the way this came to us as a voice of reason.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And the only thing else I would add, January 1st, January 6th, if there's something that makes sense, I cannot imagine that makes any difference. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep. Any other public testimony? All right, seeing none, I'll look for a staff recap and recommendation.
So yeah, I think the recommendation would be to approve resolution 2019-17. That doesn't change anything. That only adopts the methodology for the SDCs. It does not change them. And 2019-18 would actually change the master fee list to incorporate those, and then the next item is date certain, 90 days out. Do you want to make it, anybody who gets it in before the date certain of the 90-day extension, they get in at the old rate, or do you want to have the ability to have the rate change on those dates, whether an application has been submitted or not? I think David clarified the difference between a land use application and the fees and regulations that are in effect at the time of submittal versus a building permit where you can just change the fees. Whenever you pick that date, that's the date that the fees change, whether your building permits, you haven't submitted it yet, or it's sitting in the queue. I think Levi made a good point, it's a good faith thing. They're not gonna dump 30 spec homes on the market and then have them sit around just to save a couple of $1,000s on an SDC. And the city isn't going to, even though we're short-staffed and we've got a lot of building permit activity, I think Kelly can testify to this, and we're just doing this software switchover. We're not gonna drag our feet on reviewing plans and issuing permits in order to, make a few $1,000s on the SDC
I would hope
a couple of
not.
days before the switchover. We just take first in, first out, that's the way it works. Would you say that's the case, Kelly?
Well, my department doesn't benefit from the sewer SDC, so.
But they issue it, so there is a.
You use a toilet, right?
Yeah. You live in Sandy.
Toilet.
No, we would not change our practices.
Remind me on the residential rate increases. We did that for December, and those were hitting in January,
That's right.
correct? Yeah,
Mhm.
so, all right.
Those are the end of January though, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 26 or something like
Mhm.
that. Is there a logic about what day would be the best for, I guess, the city in terms of the 6th, the 1st, or the
It really,
10th?
it's right around the holidays, the 1st is before the weekend, and the 6th is the first business day after the weekend. I think the more important thing would be, whether you wanna have the date certain, and everything after that date, regardless of where it is in the queue, the price changes, or whether you just wanna,
If
that's
it's in the
what we
queue.
really need more clarity on, is whether you want to change in midstream, or anything that makes it in before the date you
The date
set
certain.
Yeah.
goes under the old rate.
So, question on that, so, say somebody comes in, hypothetical, dumps 37 permits, they get the lower rate, how long do they have till they pick up those permits before they need to refile?
You can submit, I believe the building code says you can submit an application, and you have 180 days, and once we notify you that the permit's ready to pick up, you have 180 days to pick it up. And if you fail to do it you can come in on day 179 and ask for another 180 days. So you get, 360 days.
Okay.
But as a practical matter, like, we mentioned here, you're not gonna tie up that plan review fee, for
These guys are busy. Not bad.
So I'm wondering if we wanna do, it's good up until the permit's picked up, if it takes more than 180 days from the date of the change that we assess the new fee.
One of the things to consider is we are switching to a new software, and I think there's gonna be some bumps in the road as we switch over, and I think, and Mike might have a different opinion, or Kelly too, but I think administratively, if we can make this as simple as possible
Yes.
and not have different rates going into effect at different times, that'll make it much more easier for
So
us.
if we
So you're
just-
saying you don't like my idea?
So,
That was very
so
nice.
what I'm,
Date certain.
what I'm understanding then is if we go with that hard date of January 1st,
Mhm. If you get your
and
permit in-
everything that's in
Yeah.
prior to January
Right.
1st is under the old plan, everything after January 1st is
So you're
under the
seeing
new
where I'm going.
SDC.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Make a
you
motion to
can't-
close the public hearing.
I'll second.
that's easy.
Yeah, motion, close public hearing, second by Counselor Exner. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Discussion, I like the January one.
That was for me, yep.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I like
One
the
and
January
six.
1, if we
Six.
can't get it into the
Closed on the
computer
first.
system because of that, I mean, we can buy a rubber stamp saying received on December or whatever, and carry that forward. I mean, we do that on other things, other people do, as long as it's been submitted. I go back to that three-legged stool I mentioned at the last meeting, we need partners, and part of that is in the building community as well as, future homes to pay for the entire, sewer treatment plant expansion as well as going on. The model was built on that. And if, we don't take into consideration and massage that as we go forward, we will be hurting ourselves on one of those legs of that stool, and it's more apt to topple or, not work out as well as planned or number due.
I think a point we forget to keep mentioning too is that we're protecting the home values and the investments of our residents of our community. Go ask people in Northern California what it's like to turn on your tap of water and water not go, or not be able to flush your toilet. I mean, these utilities are very important for the functionality. So many people have the vast majority of their wealth is investments are wrapped into these homes. So, I mean, that's just something that kind of gets forgotten as we move forward on this thing. So with that,
I was actually gonna say we should do it the first, because that's the last day that we are open during this last year, and then 6th is actually the first day it's opened up, so I prefer the first.
I think it's an easy
That way,
delineation.
yeah.
2020 is one way,
and it matches what our residents are doing, our developers
Yeah.
are doing. We're moving forward in the new year. Yep.
Okay.
What's the conversation? Bring it in. You guys aren't open on the first, right? Okay.
Well, it's.
It's
They're like,
on
wait a
first,
minute.
but the stand certain by the 28th.
Right.
It's okay.
I like the 6th.
No
'cause
one's
it gives
gonna
a couple
take you
days
from the
for
Rose
everybody
Bowl.
to-
Don't worry.
Oh, my.
I did want to point out, that we.
Washington's not going anywhere. Sorry, Mike.
Washington mentioned earlier, we did have 2 resolutions, one just adopting the methodology.
Right.
That's an easy one. And then, the date and whether we're on the second one, because it isn't on the resolution, it's kind of penciled in here.
Okay. All right. We should take them one at a time, right?
You,
Are you looking for a motion
Well,
for the first one, anyway?
should we go into that next week? Is it, that week between Christmas and New Year can kind of be dicey, especially on a staff level. Vacations and different things.
So you're thinking go
Get your
January
permits
6th?
in before that.
Yeah, I know, but
As a person who
creates-
works at a college that everybody has to prep up for the start of the term in that short little window of time
What,
with holiday closures and everything,
Wow.
6th is nice.
I'd say we go 6.
And then we're less likely to be arguing about somebody turning it on December 31st or the 1st or the 2nd at 6:45 a.m.
I'm not sure that makes a whole lot of difference, personally. I
so
think
Jordan, can we
first
do
of the
these
month.
can we do these together, or do they need to be
Yeah,
separate?
these people are business people.
Separate motions for the resolutions.
Separate
Yeah.
motions?
They'll make it work, whatever it doesn't do.
We're talking our staff.
Two.
True, true.
Yeah,
Processes.
resolution.
Are we
We
ready?
have a comment from the audience there.
I just wanna make it very clear, so would it be, if they drop something off on the 6th, would it be under the current rates, or would it be under the new rates?
New rates.
6 is the new rates. I would
Or
say.
is the 6th the deadline for the old rates? Because we were
It's
gonna
a-
do the
No.
1st as the deadline
Yeah.
for the old
It's an
rates.
effective date, so it'll be effective on.
Effective on
Which
January
means
sixth.
Friday
Effective
before,
first thing,
you
okay,
have until
the
that
6th.
end of that first week in January.
So anything, okay.
And if they slide it under the door on Sunday, okay.
But if it's in the queue on January 6th, it gets the current rate.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, right.
That's-
Okay.
We all clear? Can I have a motion to that effect?
I would like to make a motion that we adopt, because we have to do these separately, that we adopt the wastewater SDC methodology for resolution 17-2019.
Second?
A motion by Counselor Smallwood, a second by Counselor Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do I have a motion?
All right, I guess I'll move that we approve resolutions 2019-18 to amend the master date. Resolution including the wastewater to a date certain to be effective on January 6th of the new rates.
I will second that.
A motion by Counselor Exner, a second by Counselor Smallwood. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to our city manager report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you
guys.
guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Great job.
Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for doing business
Yes.
here.
That's in
Yes, let's do some more.
2020. Can you believe it?
Staff.
Good night.
Just a couple quick updates and one ask. Parks and Recreation Community Survey update. The postcards are being mailed today, or were mailed today. The surveys will be mailed on October 28th. Those selected households that have registered voters will first get a notice that they'll have a survey. and then the surveys will be mailed. I did have the opportunity to test out the online survey, and it worked great. So they'll have that option too, to scan the QR code or go to the website and enter their special code to fill out that survey. And I did mention, I think in an update, that we did extend the survey to the city of Estacada. About 1,000 surveys will go out down there as well.
And they're paying for that piece of it?
Yes, we're in conversations about that. We are hosting the
Wait,
Green.
there's conversations.
Well, we've asked them, yeah.
I'll call the mayor tomorrow.
Sounds like Trump asked
We'll
me.
see them on Thursday. So we're hosting the Green Infrastructure Lab tomorrow. I think we have a few city councilors that will be there. Thank you for joining us. And that will be at the Sandy Fire Annex. I mentioned already the Clackamas Cities Dinner that we're hosting, where we'll see partners from around the Clackamas County. Our latest count is 29 have RSVP, which is great. So that's at the Red Shed Public House at 6:30, and the trolley will be there.
Nice.
The blue one or the red one?
What's that?
Blue one or the red one?
Just the red.
Okay.
And then on Wednesday, I'll be at the Chamber Luncheon presenting the wastewater system improvements, similar presentation that you've seen a few times, but
It's a great topic over lunch. Thanks for this.
keep it light and clean. What part, the wastewater or the rates?
Yeah.
Because you can lose your
Yeah.
lunch over
Bring
either
some
one,
samples.
right?
That is true.
There's one late item I wanted to add, and that's getting a motion from council, something that we haven't done yet. You've seen I added an executive session for tonight. One thing that we haven't done yet is have the council formally designate me as a person to negotiate real property transactions for the city. And that's something that this council can do through just a simple motion. I move to designate the city manager to negotiate real property transactions on behalf of the city. So that would be
You
the
can tell us what to
motion.
say.
Otherwise, we don't have anyone designated right now to
Really?
do that.
Because then, yeah, and that's normally the case from past councils.
Yeah, right.
Right person to do that, so.
Are you asking for that right now?
I can speak to that too, just in case you're wondering. It's very typical to have the city manager do that. You can always add people, not limited just to one person. So in a given situation, if you had a realtor or somebody else you were working with, totally fine to add that person. And specifically, as Jordan mentioned, the executive session talks about having that conversation with somebody you designated. So that's the other really big piece.
Thanks, David. Yeah.
So we can make a motion right now? You got
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Jordan Wheeler, our city manager, to make real estate transactions, real property transactions on behalf of the city council and the
To
city.
negotiate.
Negotiate. is what I mean.
Second.
There's a motion by Councilor Pietzel, a second by Councilor Hamlin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Jordan.
That one's just for you, Jordan.
No more pay.
We're not increasing your pay.
That's right. No pay.
It depends on the transaction.
All wrapped? Wrapped
Yeah.
up?
Thanks.
All right. Councilor Schultz.
I'm good tonight.
Councilor Exner.
A couple things. Just happened that this afternoon I was picking up a few leaves and cleaning out my local drain so that the water can drain for the next big rainstorm. And I was met, I guess I would call it, by a couple of Sandy employees out of a truck passing around some of the information about what to do with the smoke tests that are happening in the next few weeks. And I appreciate that. It's nothing more disconcerting to see smoke in places that you really don't think should have smoke.
Well, it's Halloween.
Whatever. It used to be eggs for me, but I'll accept the Halloween stuff and all that sort of thing. So I appreciate that, to get that word out there and everything. I noticed that you already have a picture up on the front there. Becky Hawley is up currently doing some work on the mural, the redo and refix, and actually it's more than that. She's there's some pieces of parts of the painting there on that mural that was on the outside of our city hall here that was torn down, taken down in 6 sections,
Cool,
I
we'll just do
believe.
the one, don't worry about it.
You got it down here and up there, so I really want to just recognize Becky again. She spent a lot of hours and lots of time on doing the first one with the Roger Cook mural, which was on the side of the Ace Hardware store. Luckily, she's got an indoor job now when it's raining and such, so I just want to say thank you and look forward to seeing that up back on the outside wall of the City Hall going along. We have a opening for the Arts Commission position, and I'm having a hard time finding it in the website. I don't know if you've got it someplace in there that, and maybe I'm not the most current guy when it comes to the internet use, but just glancing through, it's tough to find it. So I don't know if that could be something you can make amends on and get that out there. I know that people have been talking about that, so I'd like to have them find it easier than what I seem to be able to not find it now. So you can do that. And then lastly, I spent 4 hours on last Friday night at the Haunt, and just as a volunteer to try to see how things went and we're going. Raining cats and dogs almost the entire evening, and they had split it up like they described with what they call the happy part of the Haunt and then the scary part of the Haunt. And there was only one young lady that just couldn't quite handle the happy hour, so feel badly. Although I heard that there was another one that.
No, that was my kid.
Is it your kid?
First.
Okay.
Yep.
One that couldn't make it, so I have to deal with
Sounded
that.
awesome though.
The terrors of dreaming for the rest of the week, I suppose. But I was pretty impressed. I think it's not quite my cup of tea, not something that I would spend my normally evenings doing, but it's certainly something that I think the City of Sandy should encourage for next year as well. Don't know how much money we're making, but I understand that the library is receiving some money from this, and so I think that nothing but good is coming out of this one, and I appreciate that. So, and that's it for me.
Councilor Lee.
I don't have anything for the sake of time.
Councilor
For
Hamlin.
the sake of time, Oregon Trail School Board meeting last week.
Yes, that was fun.
I was there with the reporter from the Post. Haven't been for a little while, and coming back, there was, the session started off with a formal complaint and public comments about that. The school district also has done an assessment of the entire district and classroom or class space within the schools, so they can actually understand their capacity a little better, to kind of understand where they're over capacity throughout the district. I can assume this is in prep for potential ask out to the community, so just to put that on your radar. And then also an update from Kelso. So if you haven't been to a school board meeting, each of the school districts, one of the principals presents on the school and some improvements they've had overall at Kelso Elementary. Also coming out, I believe, this week, Thursday this week, are the standardized assessment scores for the district as well too. I think those are released on Thursday. So that's it. How'd I do?
Thank you.
Mediocre. I'm not getting a reporting job at the Post.
No, man.
Well, you have to take mine.
Councilor Smollett.
No report.
Just had a couple things. We had a little econ meeting the other day as we're going through getting ready to appoint some people to that committee, and so that's progressing forward. There was some great ideas as well around some economic stuff around town. More to come on that. I had an experience, and I know I brought this up in the past, but this weekend of having to go to the ER, and Sandy's a long ways from an ER, and I know that having a full-fledged hospital maybe is a dream way out there, but we realized the urgent care was closed in Sandy, as well as a long waiting line in town, and so found out that Gresham doesn't have a 24-hour pharmacy anymore, and that's kind of there's a lot of population between here and Portland to have to maybe get some medication in the middle of the night as well. So I just bring that up as an awareness piece, as well as still fight whatever we can to encourage whomever we can to want to invest in our community that way. I'll be headed down on Wednesday to Oregon Connections Conference, representing SandyNet, as well as on OBAC down in Ashland for that conference down there, and it's a great Oregon conference there that we've been awarded several different ways and times over the course of the last decade down there. So be representing down there. I'm excited for the tour of the community campus there, for a lot of you guys that gals that haven't seen it yet, or haven't seen it in maybe with the lens or the perspective of what is there and could be there, or what shouldn't be there. That lens is exciting for us as a council to move forward with that as we start to dig deeper into what could happen with that property. There's also an opportunity, I haven't been sent the information, and I might have mentioned this last time, I can't remember, but there's an opportunity for Sandy to have a drone robotics. We're really well known for robotics in our community. As in our high school students have taken like second in worlds and first in nations and all these other things there, and there's a community group as not just robotics themselves, but into drones in our area here. But they're looking for a place to be able to hold that, and so if they were going to do it this year, and a lot of these competitions come from other places in the state or in other states when they do that, and so it would be great to be able to help find that a home here in Sandy as well, as things get to grow up in your community and invest in your community from those ideas and things that come a lot of times with out of your garage or maybe learned in high school or whatever. We all want to come home and find jobs and interest in our own community. So anyways, that's all I have.
Awesome. Last meeting I mentioned that a bunch of our rural communities are trying to come together to kind of form a group for C4. Mayor Drinkwine out in Estacada gave us a name and a logo, so we're like really official now to send that around to everybody. Calling ourselves the Rural Clackamas County Alliance, and it's going to be, right now it's Canby, Sandy, Malala, Estacada. We're trying to get some of the a CPO representative, not all the CPOs, and a Hamlet representative and all that, to really try to kind of coalesce. Anyone who sat around that table knows that the kind of larger urban communities get a lot of at least they talk the most. I think what we've quickly realized is that they don't have the most votes, though. So we're going to go ahead and try to turn that one on its head a little bit. So that's what's going on there. Economic Development Committee is shaping up nicely, as Jeremy mentioned earlier. We had that meeting, and I'm excited. I'm looking to have that. I think that committee needs to be having a lot of meetings like what we just had in our work session, and really work to collaborate together. A couple quick things. Trick or Treat Trails coming up this Saturday at 11:30. It's probably one of my favorite events. Oh, you better check your website, Facebook. Because that's where I snagged it, I think.
Well, we had a couple people create their own pages.
Oh, okay. So one
other businesses are using our same logo and doing it too.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Oh, really?
So I'll double check those.
Oh,
So 1
okay.
o'clock is the official start time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
1
1 p.m. Thank
What are
you
you
for your
coming-
work on
what are you
that.
coming
That's
dressed as?
a great event. What?
Mayor, what are you coming dressed as?
I'm going this year as Hulk Hogan, and so you better take your vitamins.
Are you wearing
What are you
some
gonna
yellow?
do when us Hulkamaniacs run wild on you? And Mackenzie's going as what's the anyways, but she's going as a wrestler as well.
Nice.
From that Netflix show.
Glow.
Glow. She's going as American Belle or
Are you
whatever.
wearing your belt?
It's
The
gonna be
real
great.
belt?
Oh yeah, I'm bringing the belt. You better believe it. Don't forget Library Haunt is going again this weekend. Jordan and I had a call with Senator Merkley's office late last week as well. They have a fellow from the EPA in there that kind of gave us some good information on wastewater. You may have seen the news from Jordan. We didn't end up getting that WIFIA loan. Please don't take that as too big of a blow. This was kind of our first year in, and we weren't really, we were really struggling to put together our package for that proposal. So now we're in front of them. I think the best part about actually submitting this year is now we get to have our follow-up, kind of our takeaway meeting of what we can do to better prepare for our next year. Our federal delegation, their staffs are all really kind of, we've had some good dialogue with them. They know what's going on here in Sandy, so good progress made on that. I don't think it's necessarily bad news at all. Thursdays, the city's dinner, as Jordan mentioned. And then, of course, he'll be talking wastewater. You mentioned that as well. was it last week or two? Gosh, it goes fast. 2 weeks ago, I had lunch with DJ Anderson with the school board. Really, the only thing I want to kind of bring to council's attention on that is we are working towards a dual board meeting. We definitely want to have a topic for that. I think the topic is pretty apparent, though. It goes to what Councilor Hamlin was talking about. They're definitely moving forward towards some kind of ask to the community. Obviously, we're going out with a survey on our Parks Rec Aquatic District. They're actually doing the exact same thing right now. A little bit different than what we're doing, but they're getting community feedback. So what we talked about is probably into this new year, after they receive their community survey feedback and we receive ours, it'd probably give us a lot more to really talk through, because we both will have received some guidance and stuff from our stakeholders out here. So into the next year is kind of what we're looking at for that. Okay, and then why did I write that down to myself? Oh, Sandy Style, great Sandy Style work session. Again, thank you to staff for putting that together.
Yep.
I'd like to see that again get onto one is our economic development committee, as we talked about, should definitely have that same kind of presentation and talk. And then I'd like to see us have a follow-up, maybe, we'll call it Sandy Style Session 2, but where we just take that information that we received today and just kind of have a conversation about what we took from that and where we want to go, maybe some suggestions. We got some good feedback on some of the suggestions Kelly did, and really give us some more time to kind of talk about direction on that. So with that, I'm going to close tonight's meeting until our executive session. Thank you, everybody.